The African sun hung at its peak, mercilessly drying out the savanna with its rays. Tembo, an experienced ranger, wiped the sweat from his forehead and slowly moved through the tall, dry grass, carefully looking for any signs of poachers. In recent weeks, there have been worrying reports from different parts of the reserve about hidden traps that threatened not only lions but also other animals living in the area. Protecting nature had long been Tembo's mission, and the discovery he made yesterday, another dead lioness, the third one this month, filled his heart not only with deep pain, but also with a strong determination to put an end to this crime. His rifle hung on his back as usual, though he truly hoped he wouldn't have to use it. Ahead, clear human footprints led to a small group of acacia trees on the horizon. Tension slowly tightened every muscle in Tembo's body. The poacher's tracks were fresh and easy to see, but the burning midday heat was slowing him down and making it harder to stay alert. Suddenly, the wind carried pieces of distant voices to him, and Tembo instantly froze, listening carefully. The people he was tracking were closer than he had thought. Each step was getting harder, and his throat had long been dry from the exhausting thirst. The radio on his belt crackled, but then quickly went silent. In this part of the reserve, the signal had always been unreliable. Despite all the difficulties, the ranger stubbornly continued his way, determined to find the dangerous traps before nightfall. Tembo tried to ignore the growing weakness in his muscles and the light dizziness. Over the years he had worked in the reserve, he had faced far more dangerous situations, and today didn't seem like anything unusual. The sun burned his back as he slowly moved through the tall grass, which had already turned slightly yellow from the heat. His canteen had only a few warm sips of water left, which he was saving for an emergency. Each breath burned his lungs with hot air, as if he were breathing in desert sand. Hours of searching under the blazing sun were draining both his physical strength and his spirit, making each step harder, and his vision was starting to blur. Suddenly, something shiny caught his eye in the dry grass. It was a rusty wire trap, cleverly hidden and ready to snap on any large animal, unlucky enough to step on it. Tembo's heart beat faster as he realized he was on the right path and getting close to the poacher's hideout. As he carefully bent down to take a closer look at the trap, an unexplained feeling of danger suddenly struck him. Something was wrong, but he couldn't figure out what. Taking the next careful step, the ranger didn't notice a well-hidden pit with sharp stakes inside. The ground suddenly gave way under his feet, and in an instant, his familiar world turned upside down. The fall lasted only a second, but time seemed to slow down for Tembo, letting him see with frightening clarity the sharp stakes rising to meet him. One of them pierced his leg, causing a wave of unbearable pain that made black spots dance before his eyes, threatening to take away his consciousness. His desperate cry echoed across the empty savanna, but there was no one nearby to hear his call for help. Only the indifferent vultures circling high in the sky seemed to be the lone witnesses to his misfortune, patiently waiting for a possible meal. When the first shocking wave of pain faded a little, Tembo tried to think clearly about his situation. The pit was not very deep, but with a badly injured leg, getting out by himself seemed extremely difficult. Blood was slowly but steadily flowing from the wound, soaking into the dry ground and leaving a dark, spreading stain. With growing fear, the ranger realized the obvious. The smell of blood in this wild area would surely attract predators. The radio stayed silent. In this remote part of the reserve, the signal was always weak, and now it seemed to be gone completely. The sun was slowly moving toward the horizon, and although the burning heat was beginning to ease, Tembo knew that night in the African savanna brought different, but no less deadly, dangers. Gathering what strength he had left, he made several desperate attempts to climb out of the trap, but each time the sharp pain in his pierced leg forced him to fall back. Cold despair slowly rose in his throat, tightening like an invisible rope and stealing the last bits of strength. After several painful tries, he finally managed to grab onto a strong root near the edge of the pit, and with incredible effort, pull his exhausted body to the surface. Completely drained, he collapsed in the blessed shade of a lone acacia tree growing nearby. His leg was still bleeding, and his head was spinning from the mix of intense pain, dehydration, and the beginning fever. Somewhere in the distance came a low rumbling sound. Was it an approaching thunderstorm, or the warning growl of a large predator. Darkness finally overtook his eyes and Tembo slipped into unconsciousness, completely defenseless in the middle of the hostile wilderness. A deep, rolling growl slowly pulled Tembo out of the blackness. His body felt unbelievably heavy, as if filled with lead, and his dry throat was so parched he couldn't even swallow. Yet some ancient instinct for survival forced him to open his eyes with effort, trying to understand what was happening. Around him, blurred golden shapes moved, lit by the fading rays of the setting sun, but his foggy mind couldn't make sense of the scene. Suddenly, Tembo realized that just a few steps away stood a massive lion, watching the helpless man with sharp amber eyes. The predator's powerful muscles shifted beneath his thick skin as he slowly circled Tembo, as if judging whether the man was a threat or how badly he was hurt. Nearby, a tense lioness stood still, and between her strong legs peeked a curious but cautious lion cub. A cold fear gripped Tembo's heart, but his weakened body wouldn't obey his brain's commands. He couldn't even move. The scent of fresh blood from his open wound had no doubt drawn these dangerous animals to him. If the lions decided to attack, he had absolutely no chance of survival. This thought pulsed in his mind. He mentally prepared himself for the inevitable, for tearing claws and deadly fangs. But strangely, the attack never came. The large male with a dark, majestic mane cautiously stepped closer, breathing in the scent of human and blood, then let out a soft, almost thoughtful snort. At that moment, Tembo noticed an unusual mark on the lion's ear, a distinct curve that seemed strangely familiar. The lioness repeated the male's actions, then to the man's shock, calmly lay down beside her cub, as if settling in for the night. With growing amazement, Tembo realized something that seemed impossible. These wild animals did not see him as prey. They appeared to be protecting him. His mind swirled in confusion from the unbelievable situation, but a rising wave of exhaustion again began to cloud his thoughts. The last idea to flash through his mind before he slipped back into darkness was that, for some unknown reason, these mighty predators had become not his enemies, but his guardians. Tembo's consciousness came and went, giving him brief moments to take in his surroundings before fading again into a haze. Through the veil of exhaustion and fever, an old memory suddenly rose in his mind, tied to this very part of the reserve. Many years ago, when he was a young and inexperienced ranger, just beginning his service, he had once heard desperate cries from a lion cub caught in a poacher's trap. Throwing caution aside, he ran toward the sound, feeling adrenaline force his heart to pound wildly. That day, he found a small, frightened cub caught in a cruel wire snare set by ruthless poachers. The helpless cub had a badly injured left ear, with the same distinct curve he now remembered so clearly. Not far off, the mother lioness had been pacing in panic, filling the air with a heartbreaking roar filled with pain and rage. Tembo knew the deadly risk he was taking, but he simply couldn't leave the innocent creature to die in agony. Moving as slowly and carefully as he could, holding his rifle behind his back and avoiding sudden movements, he had approached the trap, raising one hand in a universal sign of peace. The lioness growled threateningly, but against all expectations and natural instinct, she didn't attack the man approaching her cub. Dropping to his knees before the trap, Tembo had quickly and skillfully cut the strong wire with his sharp knife, freeing the little prisoner. Every metallic sound made the watchful lioness flinch and let out low, warning growls. As soon as the bindings were gone, the freed cub had darted to its mother, who instantly sheltered it with her powerful body. Then, to Tembo's amazement, she had raised her head and looked directly at him, not with rage or threat, but with a gaze that carried something almost human, understanding and gratitude. That long-forgotten memory now lit up Tembo's mind as he lay weak beneath the wide branches of the acacia tree. Could it really be that this massive, powerful lion standing guard beside him was the same helpless cub he had once saved, now grown into a majestic king of the beasts? The distinct mark on the lion's ear couldn't be just a coincidence. Somehow, the fragile bond formed years ago between a human and a wild animal hadn't broken with time. On the contrary, it had come full circle in an incredible act of mutual help and gratitude. The setting sun cast long, golden rays across the savanna, bathing everything in warm amber tones. The air slowly cooled, filling with the sense of evening and the distant hum of night insects. Tembo lay still in the life-saving shade of the tree, his body worn out by pain and fever, but his mind strangely sharpened by the awareness of the lion's unusual closeness. The powerful male, whom he now called Orion in his thoughts, sat calmly just a few steps away, his eyes gleaming mysteriously in the deepening twilight. The amber eyes of the male stared so intensely that Tembo felt a chill run through him. It was as if ancient wisdom lay behind that gaze, as though nature itself was judging him, weighing every small and great action of his life. The lioness and her cubs snuggled against the mighty male. Their bodies looked relaxed, but their alert ears kept turning, catching the slightest sounds of the savannah. They weren't just nearby. They were truly guarding their unexpected companion. In a half-dreaming state, teetering on the edge of consciousness, Tembo saw the lioness slowly rise and step closer to him. Carefully sniffing his injured leg, she did something unbelievable. She began gently licking the open wound, as if caring for her own cub. The rough touch of her tongue against the inflamed flesh sent a sharp wave of pain through him, but Tembo forced himself not to move, instinctively understanding. This strange act of care might save him from deadly infection. On the far edge of the clearing, a few hyenas appeared, their eerie, cackling calls echoing through the evening air. Their dark shapes flickered through the tall grass like ghosts, ready to pounce on a weakened victim at any moment. With each passing minute, their creepy laughter grew more intense and closer. In any other situation, Tembo would have reached for his trusty rifle, but now he was completely helpless in the face of the growing threat. However, no action from him was needed. Orion majestically lifted his massive head and let out a roar so powerful and thunderous that the hyenas instantly scattered, vanishing into the thickening twilight. That commanding sound rolled across the savannah like distant thunder, silencing every potentially dangerous predator for miles around. It was at that moment Tembo fully understood the astonishing truth. The lions hadn't just happened to be near the wounded man, and they weren't simply watching him out of curiosity. They were purposefully protecting him from other dangers of the wild. Whether it was instinct, an animal memory of a past rescue, or something even deeper and more mysterious, these mighty predators had made a conscious choice, not to harm the helpless human, but to guard him in his moment of greatest need. Tembo's life now depended not on his own strength or decisions, but on the mercy of the wild, from which he had always expected only cruelty, yet now had received unexpected protection. Deeply aware of this strange twist of fate, the exhausted ranger once again slipped into a feverish, restless sleep. At the ranger station, with the first light of dawn, an atmosphere of growing worry and fear had taken hold. Tembo had not returned from his patrol and hadn't checked in at the scheduled time. With each passing minute, the dangers he might be facing alone in the wild, empty reserve became more and more real. A team of loyal colleagues led by his best friend Juma was urgently preparing for a large-scale search, fully aware of the risk for a lone ranger. From encounters with armed poachers to deadly dehydration or attacks by wild animals. "We have to find him before nightfall," Juma said firmly, carefully checking the rounds in his trusted rifle. "We've already lost 2 of our men to the fight against poachers. I won't let Tembo be the 3rd. Armed to the teeth and bringing along experienced tracking dogs, the search team followed the route Tembo was believed to have taken, thoroughly scanning the dry savanna plains for any sign of his presence. For several exhausting hours under the blazing sun, they pushed forward, refusing to give up. Suddenly, one of the younger rangers spotted a line of boot prints in the cracked earth, leading toward a lone acacia tree on a hill. Without hesitation, they rushed in that direction. But as they approached the tree, they stopped in shock. Near the acacia tree, an entire lion pride was resting, carefully watching the approaching men. Juma instinctively gripped his rifle tighter, his finger tensing on the trigger. Had they arrived too late? Had the lions already found his friend? Was Tembo even still alive? But to his utter astonishment, the massive, majestic male lion leading the pride simply turned his head toward the tree, as if deliberately pointing the rescuers in the right direction. Such behavior was completely unheard of for a wild predator. Juma's heart pounded as he took several cautious steps in the direction the lion had indicated. At last, he found Tembo lying in the thick grass. Gently kneeling beside his unmoving friend, he reached for a pulse on Tembo's neck. The heartbeat was weak but steady, and a wave of immense relief swept over the seasoned ranger. "He's alive!" he shouted to the others, and sighs of relief echoed among the tense rescue team. The rangers carefully moved closer, preparing to gently lift the injured Tembo onto a stretcher. Juma couldn't take his eyes off the impressive lion, who stood just a few steps away. When the radio on Juma's belt suddenly crackled, breaking the tense silence, the lions immediately turned their heads toward the sound, their powerful muscles tensing, ready to leap at any threat. The group froze, afraid to make even the slightest move. "I saw them tear apart two careless tourists with my own eyes last year," an older ranger whispered, never looking away from the mighty lion. "But today, it seems they've saved a man's life." The rest of the pride stood a little further back, their golden eyes shimmering in the bright morning sunlight. None of the predators showed aggression, only calm, watchful observation of everything happening around them. As the rangers, moving with utmost care, lifted Tembo onto the stretcher, Orion took a firm step forward. His deep, rumbling breath seemed to shake the very air. Juma froze on instinct, ready for anything. Was the lion about to stop them, to keep them from taking Tembo away? But instead, something incredible happened. Orion let out a low, thoughtful sound, something like a deep sigh, then slowly stepped aside, clearing the way. The meaning of the gesture was unmistakable. Go. The lions had protected Tembo from the dangers of the savannah through the long night, and now they were willingly handing him back to the care of his own kind. At the last moment, just before the rescuers carried Tembo away, the curious little lion cub ran up and gently touched the man's limp hand with its wet nose, a tender moment of contact between two worlds that would stay forever in the memory of everyone present. As the rangers carefully carried the stretcher with their wounded comrade toward the waiting jeep, Juma couldn't help but glance back one last time. Orion stood in the same place, tall and proud, watching them leave with a steady gaze, like a silent guardian of the savannah, the keeper of an ancient, invisible bond between man and the wild. Tembo's consciousness slowly returned with the hum of the engine and the hushed, worried voices of his teammates. His whole body ached with pain, his dry throat begged for water, but most importantly, he was alive and relatively safe. Struggling to open his heavy eyelids and squinting at the bright daylight, he met the eyes of Juma, who leaned over him in the back seat of the rescue vehicle, his face full of concern but brightened by obvious relief. "We were starting to think we'd lost you for good, old friend," Juma said, his voice unusually hoarse with emotion. "When we finally found you surrounded by an entire pride of lions, they could have torn you apart in seconds, but instead they guarded you, like you were one of their own." The memories of the last day slowly returned in vivid flashes. The burning heat, the deadly trap, the searing pain in his leg, and then the lions. Tembo struggled to catch his breath as emotion surged through him. "They really didn't hurt me," he whispered, his lips dry and cracked. "Orion, that big lion with the dark mane, I saved him once, a long time ago, when he was just a helpless cub. I recognized him by the mark on his ear. He remembered me, all these years." Juma exchanged a meaningful glance with the other rangers, who silently listened to the unbelievable story. "It really does seem like they were protecting you. I've never seen anything like it in my life." Tembo's weary soul was flooded with a mix of disbelief and deep, endless gratitude for the miraculous turn of events. Whatever had happened to him in the savannah, one thing had become absolutely clear. He had survived not despite the lions, but only because of their unexpected protection. During the long days of forced recovery, Tembo couldn't stop thinking about the poachers whose ruthless actions not only brought death to magnificent animals, but had nearly cost him his own life. He spent hours studying reserve maps and countless reports about previously discovered traps. Slowly, he began to notice a pattern that had previously escaped the ranger's attention. "I know exactly how to track and catch those criminals now," he firmly told the seasoned station chief as he stepped into his office early one morning. They always return to check their traps on the third day after setting them. It's a fixed part of their routine. The gray-haired station chief, a man who had faced many dangerous situations throughout his long career, listened closely to Tembo's convincing plan. The next day, a specially assembled team of trained rangers took up carefully chosen positions around the very area where Tembo had nearly lost his life. Hidden in the tall grass of the savannah and doing their best to stay out of sight, they waited patiently for the criminals to appear. By midday, their persistence paid off. 3 strong, armed men cautiously made their way through the savannah, checking the deadly traps they had set days earlier. Their weathered faces were half covered with thick scarves to guard against the dust and burning sun, and their restless eyes constantly scanned the horizon for signs of danger. These were experienced, well-armed, and highly dangerous poachers, men who wouldn't give up without a fight. At Juma's signal, the rangers sprang into action, surrounding the intruders and shouting loudly for them to drop their weapons and get on the ground. One of the poachers tried to flee, but was quickly caught and tackled to the dry earth of the savannah. The other 2, realizing the hopelessness of their situation, surrendered without resistance, understanding that fighting against the larger and well-prepared team was pointless. "So you're the ones killing lionesses for their paws?" Tembo asked with barely restrained anger, staring into the eyes of the oldest poacher. "We get paid well for it," the man replied defiantly, showing not the slightest sign of regret. "Chinese healers pay big money for that kind of thing. Nothing personal, just business." "And how much do you think a human life is worth?" Tembo asked quietly, motioning to his still bandaged injured leg. "What price would you put on wiping out an entire species from the face of the earth?" The poachers remained silent as they were pushed into police vehicles to be taken to the holding center. The evidence collected was more than enough for serious charges. Professional tools for butchering carcasses, numerous traps both used and ready to be set, and parts of slaughtered animals already prepared for sale on the black market. A week after the successful arrest, a brief but powerful article appeared in the local newspaper, reporting the sentencing of the poacher group. Each received the maximum penalty allowed by law, 10 years in prison and a heavy fine. Yet for Tembo, more important than any official awards or public praise was something else entirely. When his wound had finally healed and he was able to return to his usual patrols, he unexpectedly saw the majestic figure of Orion, watching him from a rocky outcrop in the distance. The lion's magnificent golden mane flowed gently in the breeze. Their eyes met across the savannah, not as strangers or potential enemies, but as 2 living beings connected by a deep, unspoken understanding and mutual respect. Tembo felt a deep satisfaction knowing that this lion pride's territory was now truly safe. Not a single deadly trap, not one ruthless poacher remained in this part of the reserve. Tembo's journey had begun with a sincere desire to protect the unique world of wildlife. But through a remarkable twist of fate, it was the lions who protected him in his most dangerous hour. And he, in return, had repaid them in kind. Natural fear had given way to deep trust, and a special bond was formed between man and wild animal, a bond that neither would ever forget. Nature always finds a way to surprise us, reminding us of the deep connections that exist between humans and animals. Connections that are stronger than cruelty, greed, and meaningless destruction.